Bonjour mes amis, I'm Dustin. Thanks for joining me on SERVi Homestead again today. I'm so excited. I think we got all the stuff we need to fix the John Deere PTO box. We had failed seals and bearings because that fluid was neglected in that box for so long. I didn't even know it had its own fluid back there, but I think we have everything we need to get it straight, so let's get into it. Well, here's the PTO output box off of the tractor. This is a breather of some sort, and this is the socket that receives the main drive shaft from the back side of the tractor. And here's how it looks opened up. So Simeon and I are trying to drive out the old bearings for the output shafts. Here's the better bearing. The other one lost its needles. Alright, we got them out fairly easily. I guess they weren't a true like press fit or interference fit or whatever, because I don't think we would have gotten them out with that light of a tap. But they definitely broke to pieces, and you can see the lip in there. That's why they couldn't go that way. They had to come in, had to come out from the inside. So tap from the inside and they'll come out. And the piece we used that was the perfect diameter is this long cap that's on the Harbor Freight tire removal tool. And I just pried with a Lord screwdriver to get the back oil seal out. Here's my workstation. I have a table on top of a table, so it makes it at a nice height, and it's warm outside, so I have a fan, I have a hanging light, so it's a pretty good space for me to lay everything out and work on these bearings and seals. Here's the bearing and carrier for the clutch shaft. It has a little bit of play in it, but it seems to spin really freely. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Now it's finally time to start putting some new parts in. I put the bearings and oil seals in the freezer for a few days to make sure they shrink and hopefully slide into place better. So I simply used the Lord socket, and the oil seal for the clutch shaft went in pretty easily. I pressed it in the final amount by just tapping on a board with a hammer. These brass washers are supposed to be really thin, but they're huge. The inside diameter is an inch, and I looked all over the place trying to find an alternative site that would sell them. The original ones from John Deere were really expensive, so I just couldn't bear to get them. So I bought these from McMaster Car, and my dad sanded them down for me with my belt sander, and I just cut some oil relief grooves into them. Both of the old ones broke. This is half of one of them. To get the output shaft bearings in, I used the old bearing and a C-clamp and a piece of steel, a piece of plate steel to press them down. I was really happy with how well this worked. They went in fairly easily, got them nice and flush, so I was glad that it wasn't a fight. And I put in the oil seals in a similar fashion, and that went well too, thankfully. This is the intermediate gear, and a friend of mine told me that it should have a bearing or two on its pin, and I didn't even know. And as you can see, there's almost no evidence that a bearing was there. The only thing left is the outer shell or the outer layer of the bearing inside the gear. So I set up my frozen gear and its bearings in the vise, and I slowly squeezed and squeezed, and they went in really well without any trouble too. So that was awesome. I was really glad that all the bearings and seals pressed in so easily without the need for a press. So there was a hole here right where the pin for the intermediate gear went. I don't know what it's for, but I threaded it and I put a grease fitting in it. So I made a gasket to go under the seat base above the linkages for the hydraulic settings and the 3-point hitch and all of that stuff. And here it is. Of course, I had to tweak it a little bit once I got it back to the PTO box, but it wasn't too bad. It fit pretty well, and I think it's going to do the job. Now it's finally time for reassembly. So it gets a little tricky back here. Putting the two halves of the box together is easy, but these linkages are not easy to get to for some reason, and the book is not helpful. It's not like a true exploded view. So the first thing you have to connect is the fork at the end of the rod, the end of the linkage that connects the PTO lever, and it's hard to get to. And the fork goes over an arm, and then there's a short pin that goes through it, and then you have to put a cotter pin in the middle of that pin. Then you have to connect the adjustable fork, and it goes on to the arm. That one's pretty easy to get to, and then the short, strong yellow spring goes right next to the adjustable rod. We left a small gap between the PTO box and the tractor itself, so that I could get my hands down there and connect that pin at the end. But then when we put it all back together, I see oil is leaking out of the bottom, and so we must have damaged that main seal in the back where the drive shaft came through. But I'm just gonna have to live with it, because I'm not taking this thing all apart again and just to change that seal. And there are signs that someone's been back here before. We can see sort of a caulk material that was used to seal above the tractor transmission and under the seat box. And it looks like this linkage to the PTO lever has been welded on. The tractor is from the early 60s. I guess it makes sense that somebody would have had to do some major work back here at some point. Now, putting the rock arm cylinders back inside can be really dangerous. They're super heavy. So here we lifted them up a little bit, then we had to push the tractor back a hair, then lower them down in place. But it ended up going okay. And once you get that down in place, it has several bolts to attach it to the body of the tractor. Remember to bolt on the fluid inlet for the rock arm cylinders. Now, we removed linkages that we didn't need to, because we didn't realize that it would all come up in one unit. But if you did, be really careful, because one of these is a tiny E-clip that holds the pin in place, and it could easily be dropped down into the transmission. Now, once I set the angle and reattached the 3-point lift lever and set the draft control arm all the way forward, we're ready to test it out.
Coming around the mountain, she comes. She's coming around the mountain, she'll be coming around the mountain, she'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. She'll be blowing lots of smoke when she comes.
So we hooked up Ye Old Bush Hog. I cut for a total of about 40 minutes, and it just started making some noise more and more. I thought it was the bush hog at first, but I disconnected everything, and sure enough, something's still not right in those two shafts. Catastrophic failure again, but I think I know what it is. So stay tuned for the next episode where we hopefully actually fix this thing fully for real this time. Thanks for watching SERVi Homestead, everybody. We'll see y'all on the next one.